Good afternoon. One more time. Good afternoon.
Hello.
All right, interactive session. So, and don't worry, I'll be the one to tell Jeff when he gets back from Antarctica that nothing happened while he was gone. So, you've already met Asaf. I also want to introduce Lonnie, who is the VP of Smart Communities for Verizon, formerly of Cisco, and Martin, who works with Siemens and is formerly the Deputy Mayor of London. So who's worked both for Boris and for Mike Bloomberg as well. So interested to hear some of that experience. So we're going to start off this session focusing on the smart city and try to broaden it a little bit to think about the use of data and AI in a variety of different contexts in meeting the needs of constituents in urban areas. So, but I'd love to maybe, Simone and David gave us sort of an anchoring in data. What can data help us to do? Can we make better decisions? You know, what's the role of data? So, I want to thank Asaf for starting us off in the sewer, which is where my wife says my mind normally is, but also for mentioning bikes, because as I want to ask Martin, so there are certain circumstances under which data gives us the information that we need to be able to make different decisions, but there are times where the data is sort of counterintuitive to what we might have thought. So tell me a little bit about some of your experience at London and some of the ways you think about using data and some of the insights that you're able to generate that might have been a little different than you would have anticipated.
Great, yeah, thanks. I guess the problem with too much good data is you actually might need to act on it or do something about it, which is probably a city's biggest fear. We model the world's biggest cities, so 70 cities that we have models for. They house about 10% of the world's population, so this is a pretty big group of people. And in those 70 cities, poverty, terrorism, urban unrest, and flooding are increasing pretty much without exception in all 70. So, beyond the challenges of rapid urbanization, we also have these things. So I'll give you three facts, which might be interesting for you. The first one is if you ban all of the bikes in London, you would improve air quality by 8%.
Ignore
Okay,
that type of...
So you didn't mishear me.
Yeah, not super pedestrian bikes, obviously. But,
and given that 10,000 people die prematurely every year as a result of poor air quality in London, that's quite an amazing statistic. Now, I'm not suggesting that we ban all bikes. I think this is not potentially a popular move, but it's something to think about. I'll give you a second fact, that if you make every train in New York City driverless, you would create an additional 40,000 jobs. So this is a great case where automation actually creates many more jobs than it takes away. You can retrain train drivers. But automation the business case isn't always about taking jobs away. It's often about increasing revenues, finding better ways of doing things. And so this is also quite an amazing step that could be taken. And the third fact is if across the 70 big cities in the world, you replaced all of the fossil fuel technology with today's fossil fuel technology, over the next 10 years, you'd save more CO2 than if you replaced it with renewable energy. Okay, so there's another fact for you. So just sometimes decisions that we make don't always kind of play out in the way we think about it. And a friend of mine said to me, don't cling on to a mistake just because you spent a long time making it. And I love that because we look at our infrastructure and we decide how to make it better, and sometimes actually we need to do something slightly more radical. Yeah. And actually there's technology available to really transform the way we do it. So the real purpose of our intervention is to help the mayors, like the mayor of Copenhagen, make better decisions.
Right. Okay. So, Lonnie, you've had a lot of experience over the years with focusing on urban areas and the use of information and technology. But your title and your focus is on smart communities. So, how do you think of what's the difference to you? How do you think of leveraging technology to be able to meet the needs of constituents in a community?
Yeah, I think one of the key differences that we're seeing, or the evolution of this whole smart cities, smart communities world, is the inclusion of the citizen in that process. So a lot of times we get very enamored with the technology itself, and it kind of becomes technology in search of a problem, or data in search of a solution. And I think what we're finding is that the key metric of success, to use something you and I were talking about earlier, the key metric of success really may end up being in the adoption of that technology, or the adoption of it from the citizens themselves, and their ability to actually consume that information and consume that data and make decisions off of that. So a lot of what we're trying to be able to do, and where our shift is kind of becoming more and more, and why I'm really enjoying being more in this environment that I'm in now, is having that direct connection with the citizen itself, or the student, or the fan in the case of a stadium, et cetera, and being able to encourage technology to enable them to create solutions for their own environment. And that's something that I think is more possible today than it was, say, even 5 years ago or even 3 years ago. Because first of all, people are becoming more comfortable with the idea of having this much data of themselves and of their environment available. I think we are working through the ability to interconnect a lot of those data elements together. And I think that citizens are becoming more comfortable, and then there's more opportunity for them to create solutions for their own community. So it becomes kind of a from the city for the city solution, as opposed to some independent technology kind of sweeping in and trying to be able to solve all those problems individually.
Right.
So it's a partnership really between the governments, the private sector, and the community members themselves.
So just playing off of that point then, how do you think about that process of developing engagement? And what are the ways that you can think of technology as both providing that information, but also is a help in getting that kind of interaction between different groups?
Yeah, I think...
There's a soft first.
First off, yeah.
Jump to you.
What's interesting about, if you think of sort of these digital technologies as a new infrastructure for cities, just like road networks and the grid, then, in essence, by definition, they're a lot more open for intervention. Okay,
Right.
so sometimes people just grab it by their hands and just run with it. I mean, one example is an application for traffic called Waze, right? That Google bought a few years back. That's if you want, it's a smart city application. They help cities, make traffic flow better. They didn't have to ask any permission from a mayor before they do that, or be invited to do that in a sense. I'm speaking metaphorically here,
Yeah.
right? So they could just grab it and do something that could benefit a place and benefit citizens. And so that's one example. The other thing is that when you think about what happened, for example, with the recent elections. The question of access to technology, right, was often talked about as sort of a cause for pressure, for people feeling that they're being left out. But I wonder, if it's about access or about a feeling of ownership, right? So if we think about what Ray said yesterday, where he was talking about the idea that the most evolved thing that humans do is using language and making music and making jokes. But he forgot that he's in many ways driven by also putting pressure on human evolution to make it, evolve in a different way than it has so far, right? Which is natural. And that's another higher level thing that humans do. Does everybody share that ownership of technology, the understanding that we can use it to such an extent? To me, that's a big place to start. When you want to invite participation, it starts from the sense of ownership on it.
Right.
And it's not very different from how we needed to build cities, from the day they were born.
So I heard a couple things in there. I mean, there's the opportunity for innovators to be able to create things sort of out of band. Waze was, basically just, a couple of people that just decided, hey, maybe I got a different way we could, manage traffic and use maps. Although there are unintended consequences. So I'll just tell you two quick Waze stories. So it was founded by a guy named Noah Barderman. And what Noah found was there's a couple of things that end up happening once you put this in people's hands. So the intention that your smartphone is actually going to tell you the best route, and all the smartphones that are running the app are also reporting where they are and how fast they're moving, and they just grab all that big data and they give you a recommendation on a route that can completely be updated. And it's extraordinarily accurate, but there's two negative consequences that Noah talks about. One is the first is that in Los Angeles, so many people use Waze, and they get these alternate routes sent to them where they get off the freeways and they go through neighborhoods, that there are neighborhoods where there are citizens who post on Waze that there's an accident so that nobody will come through their neighborhood. And there's a neighborhood literally just a couple of miles from here where the town, which is unincorporated, actually hires police from another town to come in and give tickets to people on Waze-pointed routes for bogus tickets. And I know this because a friend of mine got one. He got pulled over by a policeman, and he said, I didn't run that stop sign. The policeman said, I know, but I've been told you guys are using something called Waze, and you're coming through, and I have to ticket you to stop you from doing this. And so, of course, he fought the ticket. But there are unintended consequences that come when we provide these, put these things into people's hands, when citizens quite literally start to take it into their own hands.
Yeah. I mean, somebody once said to me, we should give citizens the power to make planning decisions, and my response was, you must be out of your mind to allow people to do that. I mean, you need to take the data, take the information, which there's a lot more of it, but you need to aggregate it, and the city needs to take control of some of these decisions. That said, you could commission the private sector to do an awful lot more in our urban centres now. So,
like what?
Take poor air quality around schools. Most big cities in the world are breaching limits of poor air quality considerably. If you offered the private sector $5,000 for every child that they can get in and out of school in a day and stay below the legal limit for air quality, I reckon there's somebody in this room that would figure out a solution to do it. And it would cost the city nothing. They just have to figure out that figure. I just made up $5,000, by the way, so don't quote me on that. But, that figure will come from what it would cost to fight the diseases that these children will have through asthma, through cancer, through all of the other things that are going to come. So putting a value on some of these positive externalities, coming up with a figure, and then letting the private sector do what it does really well.
Right. Now, we were talking, though, about there's this dynamic tension between what could be the sort of chaotic sort of input from a whole bunch of citizens who could vote in the moment using their smartphones, and make some very reactive kinds of decisions, versus the more sort of paternalistic, hey, we're the government, we're here to help you, sort of. So how do you think about the engagement of the range of stakeholders to be able to get the right kind of decision making that's most beneficial to the community?
Yeah, I think that there's a real healthy partnership that has to happen to make that happen. Well, there's a big difference between applications that are going to sit on a smartphone, Pokemon Go, or even Angry Birds, or et cetera, although very popular. It's very different than when you're starting to talk about infrastructure and lights and traffic patterns and water systems and things like that. And when you start thinking about really the activities and all the sensor capabilities that are within the city, this is something you got to really care for. Yeah. So the partnership that has to happen between a government agency to maintain and protect that infrastructure and the data around that, and the citizen who wants to be able to leverage that information to be able to create something unique and different, needs to be at a much deeper level than normal types of application development. And so I think that the partnership between the public sector and the private sector will be deeper, more integrated. And then there's also, a lot of just understanding of what kinds of information do we want to maintain as open, and then which ones do we need to kind of maintain as things that are more secure, and you know, how much of that are we able to do. So some of these decisions really have to be thought through very carefully in the initial architecture of what a city is designing to do and what they are willing to kind of open up into the community, and have a bit of a plan for that as they're rolling that forward. So that way they're not also setting expectations that are out there that people are then disappointed with.
Right.
But can we put some question on that, though? We are assuming that a city is infrastructure, right? And that by making city better, you'll make the infrastructure impact air quality in a more benign way, or be more efficient, or consume less resources, or be more effective. But in fact, if you look at the city, today the city is a whole bunch of concrete and steel, and it has a lot of inertia. It's very hard to actually change it, right? There's very few things you can change there if you're looking at it from the management of the infrastructure's perspective, right? On the other hand, the decisions that people make every second basically gives rise to most of what a city is like, right? So when citizens are in the loop in that sense, decisions on how to consume, on how to pollute, on what to consume, related to commerce, deliveries of things, mobility, choice of transportation, all these things, right, are a big part of the equation of what will make a place better. So it's not just about how to improve on the nuts and bolts or on the new digital infrastructures, heavy ones in the city. Also about how to engage citizens in making those decisions better.
Right.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I think we're saying the same thing in that sense. It's not that it's one or the other. It's just that there has to be careful planning on it. So how much are we going to allow just video data to be available to the general community versus being able to ensure that there's some level of privacy and protection? So these are some of the architectural conversations that I think the government needs to kind of come up with, and then open that up so that citizens can create solutions.
Well, and also you can't. I mean, it is a dynamic tension because you've got the near term and the long term, and it's off to your point. It's you certainly people's experience of a city is malleable, and the way that they interact with the city. But in San Francisco, for instance, we've got this massive set of processes and discussion around housing, which is, I think, mapped out in cities all over the world. Is the growing gap and the challenge for middle class and poor to be able to stay in the city. And so if you don't also track on those issues and those decisions that are long term, people's experience of the city in the future is going to be potentially much worse, right?
I'm just a couple of points. I'm a big fan of listening to citizens, engaging with them. I always disliked. Listening is good.
You want their data, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, listening is good. Tell me when
messy.
You're happy and unhappy, and that's all fine. And we'll take that into a big pot. But you've got to be careful. I think the world has changed a bit. We need to listen to people a bit more carefully. If I had my way, I'd have a rage scale. 10
at least
being,
an outrage scale.
10 being I'm really, really angry, and 1 being this is a good day, because this is actually what matters, what people care about in cities. I mean, they care about housing and they care about different things. But if you're delayed on your journey to work one time on Monday, you shrug your shoulders and you move on. If it happens again on Tuesday, you become angry. So rage is cumulative, okay? By Wednesday, if it happens again, you're talking about moving out of the city. I don't want to live here anymore. But that's valuable. That's now really useful information. This is now very powerful stuff. And I don't think we are capturing how people feel through their day, through their working life, through their trip home, through how they engage with the city in quite the right way yet. And when we do, I think then we can start to really target the solutions that are going to matter to people.
Okay.
So, but why would maybe one way to rephrase this is to say that it would be funny to think of using these capacities to connect that we have today for mass self-broadcast and for picking out communities in order to create sort of an advanced version of town hall, right, where everybody votes together on the budget or on things like that. That we know will not work, mostly because if you think about the profession of planning, it's a social science, right? It's about empowering those who are underrepresented, not just caring for the majority. And that's something that if you just poll the majority, you're not going to get off the bat. So there needs to be an intermediary when it comes to some things. Right? When it comes to other things, people are not going to ask a question to the city. Right? They're just going to introduce a technology that people are going to use, and there's going to be pressure on the city to adopt it or regulate it. Yeah. So the role of cities is becoming very interesting in that sense, as the key regulator of what can or cannot happen in the place. I hope as a key enabler, right, of what can make a place better. Because a lot of the offerings are not going to come from it. They're going to come from the outside.
Yeah.
Right. And I kind of agree
already
with
are.
that. You see a lot of new positions opening up in cities to, I think, care for that. You know, not just chief technology officers that kind of look across all municipalities and can kind of make some of those social decisions on how we're going to leverage data. You know, chief resiliency officers, you hear that. I've heard chief of streets. I've even heard of a chief de-junkification. I thought that was a lovely one. I like that one, actually.
If you look at planning departments around the world, they teach more and more technology. Yeah. And if you look at computer science departments around the world, they teach design and city planning. So it's natural that very, very quickly you'll see people in administration that have a deeper and deeper understanding of technology.
Right. Right. What you don't find necessarily, though, is in all cases, cities have as much of sort of legacy infrastructure challenges as a lot of corporations have. And so what you find, I think, is an increasing focus right now is it's always a work in progress, but you've got a bunch of legacy systems. You also have a bunch of what you can think of as almost legacy departments, which are very siloed. And the information systems are often designed based along those lines. And so what I hear repeatedly, my company's got an initiative focused on the future of the city, is it's actually one of the biggest deliverables for technology infrastructure is helping information to span those silos in the city of a lot of the decision makers, because they're often making decisions in relative vacuums. It's not, you know, just that I want the information from the citizens. I want information from my peers and what's going on in their departments to be able to collaborate and make better decisions. So I want to open up to questions in just a second, but one more for you guys. So you've all mentioned at some point issues related to sensors, and so what we're doing is, you know, Benjamin Bratton earlier was talking about the stack and sort of the layer of information about often increasingly sensors, artificial intelligence, and then ways of making these sort of real-time decisions about cities. How do you think about it? There's almost this sort of tech utopian view in Silicon Valley, just more data is good, so let's just put sensors everywhere, or maybe cameras everywhere. How do you think about what's the best type of information to be providing to citizens and decision makers? Where should sensors be put? What are the kinds of things that are going to help them make better decisions in the future? And any of you?
I'll start. To me, it really depends on the problems that a city's trying to solve. So I don't think there really is one technology that is a blanket best case for everyone. Some cities have a much bigger issue around the safety and security of their individuals, and so they might be focused on solutions that are going to have more camera-based activities, or maybe more, emergency alerts and those sorts of things. Other ones might have a very, very heavy issue around traffic, and that's causing housing prices to increase, and this continual increase of rage, which I love. So, you know, then they're going to focus on probably more sensor activities within the street layer, and knowing how to predict traffic patterns and move things over. So I think we've always got to stay very focused on the issues within a community versus the technology first. Otherwise, I think we end up making, you know, again, technology search for a problem. Yeah.
Right.
Firstly, Gary was having a dig at London of how many cameras we have. On an average trip, you're filmed 50 times in London, but it makes it a very safe place. You don't feel it.
And you don't have to take your own selfies, because it's already being done.
Perfect. So if you want to be famous, go to London. I think the more sensing, the better. I think it allows us to solve very local issues within cities that the kind of broader policies don't tackle, which is obviously a good thing, and picks up Asaf's point about inequality. Those communities that are disenfranchised, forgotten, or lost, can be pulled back in through much better understanding of what's happening in those communities. And something Lorraine from GE said earlier, our technologies are being enhanced so that they are now predictive, even prescriptive, so that now if you've got enough sensing, you can also make your technology decide how it's going to react. Is it going to shut down make all the traffic lights go red in areas of very high air pollution on a day when it exceeds a certain limit? So this kind of real-time ability to absorb the data and then churn it back out as a series of actions is very, very powerful.
You're basically encoding policy into AI.
Exactly, in real time, right, in hotspot areas that need attention.
Right.
Maybe another way to think about this is that there is already a lot of data out there, right? In fact, there is probably more data than we can make sense of at the moment. Yes, there are specific areas where we're lacking in our blind spots, and we need definitely higher resolution when it comes to location, when it comes to temporal dimensions. But let's make the assumption for a second that this data is going to come with the evolution of technology. There's one big missing part of this equation, which is almost like a limitation of an Internet of Things. So if things talk back to us and tell us what's the state of things, so what? Okay, so you know that something's happening somewhere. What do you do? So the capacity to close the loop and actuate, right, is a big missing part of of making a place responsive, of making a place adaptive or adaptable. And I think we'll be seeing a lot more focus on that, on how does the infrastructure respond, how do people make decisions, how does information get communicated back, how is it consumed, if you want. Maybe there are moving systems as well, like autonomous systems. So that to me is maybe the bigger part that's missing today, rather than the capacity to observe.
Well, no, and I think you made a key point about the usability of information, how it's consumed, because you're right, we have probably more data than we need about a lot of activity in our urban areas, but there's a variety of characteristics I think that are important. One of them is open. I think Lenny, you made this point earlier, but there's a great app. I don't know if you guys know of a San Francisco group called Stamen. They're a design company, and they love taking open data and making it really usable. And so they found that there was this data set that was about crime activity in the city of Oakland, and they popped it into a Google map. And what you could do is if you were going to go from point A to point B on a particular time of day, you would see where muggings had occurred in different areas, and you could actually plan your route so that you would avoid those areas. Now, some jokester was saying, well, then the muggers can just figure out where it hasn't happened before, and that's where they're going to be waiting. But they probably didn't end up using the app. But that's a perfect example where you've got data the city is gathering about crime activity, and somebody just steps up and makes it accessible. So that type of more open and more platform kind of approach for cities takes a lot of the responsibility out of the hands of the city and makes it accessible to entrepreneurs to be able to do something with.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that a lot of it also depends on how ready a community is for some of these things. So London, for example, was really ready, right? They are very comfortable with the fact that they have this much sensing activity around. There may be other areas that may be a little bit more uncomfortable with that, and the citizens aren't ready. Another example, San Francisco and even New York, et cetera, are really comfortable with sharing of assets. I think you spoke earlier about a lot less driver's licenses being issued and things like that. So solutions like you see over here that are displayed, Swift Mile, and being able to share bicycle assets and things like that. That's going to be more easy to do in communities that are going to be more accepting to that, whereas others are going to be like, no, I kind of like my own car and I want to be able to go through that. So I think a lot of it just really does depend on the community itself and how ready are they for some of these things.
No, absolutely. And you also, by making more and more of that information available, that can help the community
get more comfortable.
Oberlin, Ohio, where my son goes to school, they actually have a city dashboard. You can go to public areas and you see this, real-time reporting of everything from water flow to waste flows to traffic flows, and they don't have a massive amount of sensors in different places, but it's all they're increasingly factoring in the design of the ability to report that information and make it accessible to people. And it's a small town. It's not, you know, we wouldn't even call it a city by most standards. So questions for...
I would just say very quickly that those cities that aren't ready for that level of sensing need to get over it. You know,
I think they will, too.
Yeah.
It's a kind of simple message, but if not, then people will leave and go to another city that's more attractive, where they've got nice trees and free-flowing traffic, and you know, people vote quite cleverly with you know, the decision of where they're going to live based on some quite basic things.
Yeah.
And I think if with the technology available today, those cities that have more sensing are going to be better places to live, and people will go and live there.
That's a good thesis. I'd love to see that one. I'd love to see the data. I'd love to see the data.
One thesis.
So questions for our, sorry, my mic runners here. So
There's one there.
This one over here.
okay, great. Please. And please identify yourself.
Sure. Hi, Mike Marinello from Turner. Hi, Martin. One of the things that you haven't talked about, or we didn't talk about yet, are mayors themselves. And there are organizations in which mayors are actually sharing data amongst themselves about what's going on in their cities. And you know, I'd like to hear a little bit about how data can help mayors not only talk about their own city and learn about their own city, but talk to other mayors and learn from each other.
Hi, Mike. Mike and I work together with Mike Bloomberg on the C40 initiative, which is a club of cities, and where they share information. And one thing that mayors, when they get together, realize is that their cities are unique. They have their own very unique footprint, thumbprint, whatever, but just everything is different. You cannot take a solution in one city and assume that you can translate it. I've seen it, bus rapid transit schemes that have been put in one place, and mayor looks at it, goes, wow, that's great, and decides to copy it, and it's an absolute failure because of density, because of speeds of traffic, because of where different communities are located. There's thousands of reasons. So what the mayors did when they got together is try to understand what the commonality is, but also what the differences were. And this was incredibly eye-opening, which is why we now at Siemens have a very focused group of people in each of these cities to try and understand the individuality of the place. So it's very important that they get together. They try and copy one another. They try and improve things. So London's bike hire scheme is by far the best in the world. I'm just saying that. You don't have to believe me.
After Paris, right?
After Paris. Well, we took Paris and we just made it better. And the mayor of Paris at the time said, good, you know, that's what you should do. You should steal good ideas and make them better. But you also have to make them fit. And I think this was the learning from the C40 organization, which is copy with caution. It's probably the short summary.
Yeah.
And actually, I really love this industry for this reason. There is so much collaboration that actually is happening. So not even just among cities and mayors, but also even within industry. We're all learning from one another. This is an industry that's being built as we're going, right? I always call it that we're flying the airplane while we're building it. Yeah. And you know, that really requires a lot of teamwork and a lot of collaboration. So it's not even just amongst public sector folks talking to one another and private sector folks talking to one another. It's really this massive collaboration amongst a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, I would just say, I mean, certainly from your experience, Martin, but mayors have an almost impossible task in cities of any size. There's a number of cities in the U.S., many overseas, that are equal to the size of either states within the U.S. or small countries. You know, Los Angeles, 11 million people. I mean, it's you know, it is literally the size of some small countries. And so the mayors, in many cases, are dealing with a level of complexity and layers of decision-making that in the past have been, you know, it's almost, you know, sort of Byzantine constructs. And so what the opportunity that they have, if they've got more of this information coming to them, they actually do understand the priorities of their constituencies better if it's done well. So other questions for, yeah, please down in front. Our mic runner is running.
W2O Group. Asaf, I'm going back to your initial presentation you did. It was fascinating about this concept of putting sensors or going down and actually doing testing in sewers. In my mind, why wouldn't every city do that? And maybe Martin, you could comment on that. And maybe there's a Tom's approach, Tom's Shoes, where certain developing country cities would want to do it but might not be able to afford the technology. But for every city that installed it, a city in the developing world gets it. So
Yeah, buy one sewer, get one sewer. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Well, sensors in the sewer.
Yeah, okay,
To look at micro.
Sorry, misunderstood. Yeah.
It's a good question, but I would interpret this as a question of execution. So, I mean, I have two hats. One in the academia, where your mandate is to create knowledge, new tools, to advance a sort of our capacity to ask and answer questions, right? And there is, then there is a whole other set of entities that then take these ideas and make them happen. And often is the case that you start somewhere which is more affluent, and then it's being, cost goes down and it's being copied elsewhere. This particular project happens to have been sponsored primarily by the government of Kuwait, and was initially conceived for the region of the Amazon, where there is a lot of trace of biological matter in the river itself, because it's used also for refuge. So I don't know if I answered your question. I think the sewer is a vast source of information, right? It's for the moment it's untapped, but I have no doubt that we will see quite a bit of learning coming from the sewer. It's easier to do it there than on your toilet, because it's a lot less invasive, so it's quite attractive.
It's mass and it's the early warning system that seems like it's critical.
Yeah.
I've been down London's sewers, so I wish they'd had bloody sensors back then, so I didn't have to go down. But what it taught us is that they're not big enough. They were designed for 4 million people, and London is 8. So you can put as many sensors down there as you like, but you have just a fundamental lack of investment in infrastructure over the years. Interestingly, in California, you have the cheapest water rates, not in the US, but almost in the world, which indicates to me you're probably underinvesting in infrastructure as well. And over time, that's going to catch up. What sensors in sewers do really well is help you optimize what you have to a point, but beyond that, you need to actually build more sewers. And I think this is a big issue in many established cities in the world today. It's a really hard thing to go back and retrofit. Right. But new cities, the greenfield type cities that are popping up, can think about this much more easily.
Right.
I'm not sure I answered it either, but kind of. Okay, good.
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, please, back here.
Hi, I'm John from Hyundai Motor Company. This is a question for Martin. If I heard you correctly, you said if you make every train driverless, you would create 40,000 jobs. If I'm incorrect, can you correct me? And if it's true, what are those 40,000 jobs look like?
That is true. So when you automate a train system, it's quite extensive thing to do. So you don't just take the driver away, but you have to upgrade signaling and all sorts of things. What it means is you can put far more trains through the same space in the city more quickly, which means you make more revenues, which is where you get your business case from. But to do that, you need to create jobs in engineering, signaling, software, hardware. It creates a vast number of jobs, and good jobs, jobs that cities like to attract young qualified people to do. So that's the way we modeled it. It's a similar figure for London. And yesterday there was a tram crash in London, and allegedly the driver fell asleep. The tram went too fast, fell, and 7 people died. Okay, so this is a great case to argue against the unions for having train drivers. Just get over it, automate these systems, make them safer, smoother, they consume less energy, they can carry more people. So it's a great story for any city to go ahead and do, and we have really great data for that.
Well, I think this is just one example, because the truth is, many cities are, large enough with, massive constituencies and a lot of people supporting the activities of the city. There's a marvelous entrepreneur out of the UK named Wingham Rowan, who took an application that has actually been used in the UK in a number of different cities that takes all of the temporary work that the city needs to have done and makes it available to its citizens, which is, it's a tremendous asset. It's got us work. So think of all the different assets, all the things that a city needs to have done, And if it had more of this capability to make the determination, all right, so these sort of leap forwards that we can do, what are the ways that they actually create more economic opportunity and more involvement of citizens, rather than less. So automation is not this sort of net, just job loss sort of process, but potentially, one that actually creates brand new assets for the city. So, the questions, right here.
I'm going to direct this to Martin. Speaking of citizens, sewers, and natural disasters, you're a few months ahead of us, having lived through Brexit. Any recommendations for us on our own version going on here now?
Yeah. Calexit. Go for it.
That's right. All right, who's with us? Let's go.
So here's my experience of Brexit. It's really a comment to the government. Don't ask a question and expect people to answer it in the way that you hoped. You give a citizen power and they will use it and abuse it to the maximum. So people didn't vote to leave the European Union. They simply voted because they didn't like the government. And they were given the power to do that. How do I feel about it 3 months on? This will give you a sense of how you're going to feel. There are 5 stages of grief.
Yeah, absolutely.
Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I've reached depression.
Congratulations.
So I'm 4 out of 5. I think I will stay in depression for the next 40 years.
Okay.
That's how I feel about it. So good luck. I wish you well.
Yeah.
But I feel a little bit better than I did 3 months ago. So if that's some consolation,
Yeah.
that's about the best answer I can give you.
Yeah. So any other, one more question, then I've got something to wrap up.
Hi, it's Hitain from Cisco. My question is around Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. So there is a lot of work being done on major cities, but I feel there is still a lot of opportunity in cities which are growing, where by design you can still make difference, you can still make changes. So what's being done on that side, or are Tier 2, Tier 3 cities getting ignored because the major cities are still focus of area?
Maybe Lenny, you want to take that one? So
Yeah.
Briefly, if you can.
No worries, go quickly, but I completely agree that Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities are a fantastic place for us to be able to really showcase smart communities. And they're good for a couple of reasons. A lot of these Tier 2 cities are actually still really large and very complex, and they have a lot of very real problems that are similar to the large cities, but they have a management structure within the city that allows us to make decisions faster and actually allows us to also probably share data amongst different municipalities in an easier manner as well. So in many cases, these Tier 2, Tier 3 cities are the first place that these activities are actually occurring. So if you take into consideration the U.S. Department of Transportation and their recent challenge that they put out there, Columbus one, and there were a lot of much larger cities that were out there when Google did their Google Challenge for Fiber, Kansas City one, right? So again, I think that people do look at the qualities that you're seeing with Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities to be able to really ensure that these solutions are viable and they're executable on the ground, right? You get beyond PowerPoint.
That's great.
And there's it's not such a quick point, but I'll try to touch on it briefly. Tier 2 and Tier 3 suggest some sort of a hierarchy. Let's talk about the smaller cities. Some of you might have read Jeffrey West's work. I think he spoke here a couple of years ago about scaling effects in cities. So the bigger cities tend to be to produce more GDP, to have more creative industries, to consume less resources, have economies of scale in a superlinear sense with respect to size, right? So if you double the city, you get more than double the positive effect and less than double the negative effects in terms of the demand for infrastructure, etc. I'm simplifying this, but let's stay with that for a sec. So that has led to great attraction, probably, of people to big cities. But the assumption today is that perhaps the underlying principles that make a place productive right, are social exchanges between people. And if we can start to enhance the capacity of those smaller places to connect to the rest of the world, perhaps you're able to overcome some of those limitations that make them less attractive than those largest cities that we know around the planet. Right? And that's a fundamental point. And on the other end, there's a question about, is there an optimal or maximal size that cities should get to? Right? What happens when Guangzhou and Shenzhen and Hong Kong connect to 110 million people? Are you now at the point of diminishing returns? We don't know yet. But these are also fundamental questions.
Well, it's an excellent point, because I think what you don't want is for people in the smaller towns to continue to feel disenfranchised. You know, they'll have burned into my brain the map of the United States, you know, with the sea of red in the rural areas and these blue, you know, dots of the cities, and the disaffection that you know clearly rose from people feeling like they were isolated. So we've run out of time. I want to thank the panelists here, and look forward to seeing you in the city.
Thank you. I wanted to mention, with my entrepreneur's hat on, I rode my Copenhagen wheel here, so anybody wants to try it, you're welcome to jump on it. It's outside.
All right, cool.